think maybe he talked about some getting even schemes, like tricks that you could do on people, like taking the lug nuts off of somebody's wheel.
Kathleen Johns was a woman that was down in Central California, and she claimed that somebody pulled next to her and said her tire was about to fall off, and then that person took her and her child from her car into their car, drove them around, scared her. She was able to jump out on a freeway overpass or entrance lane or something and hide from this person, and ultimately went to the Patterson Police Department. And that's when she was there, she saw a picture that was made by the police officers in San Francisco who had ostensibly seen the killer of Paul Stine walking near the Presidio after the killing. And she saw this picture that had been made and passed out to other police departments, and she immediately pointed to this picture and said, "That's the man that abducted me in his car."
He told me that what you could do would be to drive up alongside of some lady. He would never do this to a man. It was always going to be a girl. And you'd wave your arms and point at the wheel and tell her to pull over. And when she pulled over, you'd tell her, "There's something wrong with your wheel back here. If you got a lug wrench, I'll take care of it for you." Then he would take the lug nuts off so that there really would be something wrong with the wheel.
Back in 1990, when I had this photo lineup with Arthur Lee Allen, we met with Johns in a Denny's restaurant down in the San Jose area. She was likewise showing the photo lineup, and she was unable to pick anybody. She had a boyfriend at the time. She wanted him to feel sorry for her, but that's only my guessing on it. I don't know. It could have been true, but something just doesn't feel right about it.
Zodiac's willingness to take credit for crimes that were attributed to him, the Bates murder in Riverside, he was willing to take credit for that, even though I'm convinced that he didn't commit that murder. He was willing to take credit for the alleged kidnap of Kathleen Johns, when I don't believe that he did that. But those cases were publicized. People theorized that he had committed those crimes, and it served his purpose to take credit for those cases.
On that same day, we went out, and the neighbor was out in his backyard, and Leigh took me over and introduced me to him. He was a nice old gentleman, old, 80-something. Before we parted with him, he said something like, "I've seen what's going on over there," and he kind of gave Leigh a dressing down. And I didn't know what it was about, but Leigh was angry. After we went in the house, he told me, "I'm going to kill that old man someday."
As many have said, if what Don Cheney said is true, Arthur Lee Allen absolutely has to be the Zodiac killer.
Yes, I believe Cheney's story. I wonder sometimes if he's not more involved in the case than he wants to let on.
Leigh had a ball of paraffin to squeeze, and I had been squeezing it earlier, but then I rolled it and polished it so that there were no fingerprints left on it. And he wanted a fingerprint, so I put my thumb on it and pressed it down, my right thumb, and then I left.
When I went to Washington to interview him, the interview, just something, a sixth sense or whatever it may be, didn't feel right. So I asked Cheney if he'd take a polygraph. And we went to the Washington State Police, and they in Tacoma, and we're going to run a polygraph. But he drank too much the night before. He knew he was scheduled for this, and came in terribly hungover, couldn't take it, then took it later, came back inconclusive. Things like that I didn't really care for. And then now I understand lately he's come out and said that since the information has come out regarding San Francisco Police Department trying to get DNA off stamps that might have been licked by the Zodiac, Cheney's come out and made mention that that he and Arthur were doing something, and Arthur had him licking his stamps.
After I came in, he showed me the watch, and he was in the process of writing thank you notes and, stuffing them in envelopes and that. And he had a box of stationery items on the table that was handy. He says, "Why don't you stamp some of those envelopes for me?" So I did that.
He never said that to me. He never said that to any law enforcement that I know of. And I'm wondering if there's a possibility he's trying to cover up if his DNA shows up on any of these stamps.
Has anybody ever made any attempt to do a DNA test on Cheney?
You know what? I don't think so. I don't think so. They've run we took fingerprints, and we had handwriting exemplars on them, and neither one of those matched.
I met Don Cheney, I think, 2 or maybe 3 times. Once a diving trip over to the North Coast. Another time he visited with Leigh in Monterey when I was staying at my mother's house. And I really didn't get to know the guy. He made me feel a little uneasy, and I couldn't tell you why.
Don Cheney is in my opinion, one of these people. He's an engineer, and he's intellectually honest. He has a capacity to stick with what he knows, and I've never known him to lie about anything, and he's still the same person I knew in college.
So you have no reason to doubt him?
No. No reason at all.
I'd like to tell you about somebody a little different from this dark figure, this maniacal killer that seems to come across in at least a couple of in the book I was reading just prior to coming down here. He was a bright, interesting guy with a good sense of humor. My mother liked him, my wife liked him, all my kids liked him. But he was not only left-handed literally, but figuratively too. He reminded me, when he was younger at least, of the young man in Catcher in the Rye. He was well-meaning screw-up. He could find more ways to mess up his life than anybody I ever met.